Let's move on. Sean Cox sustained serious life-altering injuries earlier this year while attending a football game in Liverpool. Earlier this week, the Merseyside police reported that Italian officers have arrested a man in Rome using a European arrest warrant in relation to the incident. The suspect appeared in court on the 6th of October and has been remanded in custody ahead of an extradition hearing. 2 other men have already been charged in relation to the incident. Filippo Lombardi, 21, was charged with violent disorder and wounding, inflicting grievous bodily harm, and will appear at Preston Crown Court on Wednesday. That's today, ahead of his trial on Thursday. In August this year, Daniele Sicchiuso, 29, was jailed for 2.5 years after admitting violent disorder outside Anfield on the same date. Over the past number of months, Sean has been taking small but important steps on a road to recovery. His journey will be long and difficult, and the focus will continue on ensuring the best care to maximise the potential in Sean's recovery. He has recently commenced a programme of rehabilitation in Dunleary, and following this will continue to require ongoing and intensive long-term care and support. The reality is that the provision of this long-term care and support for Sean will necessitate significant funding over many years. The figure of 2 million has been mentioned in the newspapers at the weekend, and you can see there a GoFundMe has been set up. It's gofundme.com/support Sean Cox. Fergus McNulty is the chairman of St Peter's Dunboyne GAA Club, and he joined Owen in studio yesterday to talk about the launch of the Sean Cox fundraising efforts and to talk about where he is now.
Okay, so as you can see, we've put up a link to the GoFundMe for Sean Cox. It's gofundme.com/support Sean Cox. It's already got a huge amount of support financially, as you can imagine, and I'm delighted to say that the chairman of St Peter's GAA Dunboyne, Fergus McNulty, is with me in studio. Fergus, you're very welcome.
Hey, Owen.
It's very striking, isn't it? I think at the time of recording here, about 21,000 on this latest GoFundMe page for Sean Cox. The support here has been absolutely incredible.
Absolutely, and has been since April. So I think the amount of support, solidarity, messages of support, really since April has been just enormous from all corners. So I think we're 4 or 5 days up and running in terms of the campaign. So we're already seeing that just people are genuinely kind of engaged and touched by Sean's story. So, obviously it's great to see.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. We can see as such a global impact on it as well when you go into the donations on a bit-by-bit basis in the GoFundMe page. But ultimately you're here on behalf of St Peter's GAA because Sean Cox is such a big part of St Peter's GAA. In fact, he was your predecessor as chairman at the club.
He was, yeah. So Sean has been, he's been at the centre of the club now for, over 15 years or so, involved in all aspects of the club. So, I took over from Sean, but I'd worked quite closely with Sean for many years before that. So he's been a driving force, not just in the GAA club. And I know, he probably is most associated with the GAA club, but he's very involved in the athletics club, and the athletics club have been quite helpful and are very much part of our campaign as well. But also, in terms of the general community, in terms of, just supporting how the community comes together and how the community develops. And Sean has been kind of a tireless kind of activist in that respect. So, I think that's why as a community we feel very, I suppose, connected to try and give something back to Sean and just obviously support his recovery.
Absolutely. Where were you when you heard what had happened to Sean earlier on this year?
I was actually at home. I was watching the game, and I took a call that obviously something was up. So really from there it unfolded very quickly and was obviously a bit of a blur. But I was actually ironically at home watching the match.
Yeah, Martina's done an interview with the Sunday Independent this week with John Green, and just talking, I guess, about that moment when she finds out about what had happened, but I guess not realising at the time just quite how serious that was. I presume that was kind of the same for everybody around Dunboyne who was hearing about this initially, that there had been an incident, there had been an attack on Sean, but nobody had quite realised just how grave it was at that moment.
Yeah, I mean, just you cast your mind back. An absolute shock, I think, would be the main recollection that I would have. Shock on a number of levels. Obviously, when you know somebody who gets caught up in something like that. But the fact that it was Sean is he's a very quiet individual. Somebody who absolutely would not be getting involved in any sort of trouble, etc. So I think all of those elements, like going to a sports game, you would expect that the last thing you would expect is to get caught up in something like that. So I think that shock was really the overwhelming kind of sentiment at the time. But then that quickly turned to how can we help, and how do we kind of get our arms around supporting Martina and the family. And that's really where I think the focus has been since.
You mentioned it happened very quickly, that the focus turning to how can we help out. I'd imagine it was pretty much instantaneous when you realised that help was going to be needed, that the whole community really rallied around this cause as soon as you heard about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I suppose, generally I think people probably felt a bit helpless as well, because you're not really sure what you can do. There's not very much you can say. So I think a lot of that solidarity and support was expressed probably through goodwill and kind of gestures of support. You saw that the various banners of support, etc. So I think as that's evolved over the last number of months and it's become clear in terms of where Sean is at with his recovery and what he's going to need into the future, it's turning that goodwill and solidarity now into I suppose a financial commitment, that we can do our bit to really kind of support the best type of recovery for Sean as possible.
Yeah, because the financial commitment at the moment, I guess he was moved to Dunleary, to the rehabilitation centre there last week, and that's a 12-week programme. It's government funded, but then after that, financially, the Cox family will have to be self-sufficient in that regard.
Correct, yeah. So you're pretty much on your own after that process. So Dunleary, which is the right place for Sean, and really I suppose he can begin his rehab in earnest, but that's a relatively short process. So really after that, I think it's finding what's the best opportunity for Sean after that. But essentially, it's a private process.
I presume a couple of people from Dunboyne have made a trip over to Liverpool when he was there, and perhaps, I'm not sure, he's only just in Dunleary, I suppose, only in the last week, as I say, so maybe not a whole pile have visited him. You visited him yourself, I presume. What was that experience like?
Yeah, so he moved to Beaumont in May. I think there's been a kind of a small group that have just, I suppose, visited Sean in that time. I suppose initially it's clearly a very difficult process for Martine and the family, and that's where your thoughts are at. But thankfully we have seen, and certainly from my experience, that Sean is taking small steps. He definitely is. He's moving in the right direction, albeit very slowly. And obviously that gives you a lot of hope and encouragement, and really I suppose it's that it's going to be a multi-year process. So really from our perspective, I suppose it's rallying around and see how you can best support Sean in that process. Yeah,
it's such a dark area of medicine, isn't it, that there's so much yet to be discovered about the human brain, and ultimately everybody makes recoveries at different rates and things like that. There was glimmers of hope, I did feel, reading Martina's quotes in the newspaper at the weekend, that, as you say, at least the direction was going in the right way. Maybe as it's hard to know how quick that'll happen or what the end result of that direction is going to be, but at least, as you say, it is in the right direction, and I think that little bit of hope is all somebody like the family needs at this moment in time, just to see little increments of improvement, because at the very start you just don't know if improvements will come at all.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, but only last week we Jack, his son, was part of one of our junior footballers won the championship in Meath, and Jack was very much part of that team. He played a bit of a starring role in that game, but we brought the cup into Sean, and he definitely was, you could see that it definitely resonated with him. So it's those signs, I guess, that you say, this is a process, but it is moving in the right direction. So and I think it's certainly we look forward to hopefully at some point getting Sean a reasonable quality of life where hopefully we'll get him on a sideline at some point in the future.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. I guess even as well, just speaking about Jack there, I think I saw Bill Shankly quoted as soon as the incident happened, which is, the life, death in football and all that sort of thing, which is often kind of pulled up around these sort of moments. But at the same time, you talk about sport and you talk about very awful circumstances like this and the coping mechanism that sport can provide. And I'm sure that was the case for someone like Jack over the last couple of months, working and training and working towards this junior title with Dunboyne.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think the one thing that sport definitely does, and we've certainly seen it with different sporting communities coming together, that it definitely binds people together, and there's kind of a common language around it, and there's a kind of a support framework around sport, which clearly this is bigger than sport, and this is the most important thing. But I think sport actually is an outlet, and it's a way of actually people kind of engaging around in this case Jack and supporting Jack. And I suppose it's part of your identity. And certainly we've seen, for example, we've a lot of contact with a lot of the supporters in Liverpool, a lot of absolutely fantastic people. And you can see that that kind of common identity just really, they want to reach out, they want to help, and it's part, I suppose, of what kind of binds people together.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It's been so encouraging, I'm sure, to see the support that it's all got. So it's GoFundMe.com/support Sean Cox, and any donation there I'm sure will be appreciated. Fergus, thank you so much for popping into the studio. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Yeah, we were just saying there that this is just a terrible story, and when you hear there that it's going to be a multi-year thing in terms of rehab, these stories they happen, and then the next phase happens and everybody moves on with their lives, but the Cox family, their lives were altered forever that night.
Yeah, I think it's all best in that Sunday Independent article with Martina Cox last weekend, where they just talk about this kind of strange moment where they hear that something's happened in Liverpool, and it becomes very clear very quickly that this is going to be something that has obviously changed Sean Cox's life, but it's going to change all of their lives. And you listen to that piece there, and it is just a huge show of support from everybody in Dunboyne, but also around the whole world at the moment. St. Peter's GA are going to do a lot of great work over the next couple of months. They're making a huge push in terms of the fundraising, but you look at the GoFundMe page and the donations coming from Liverpool fan groups around the world, from people around the world who've heard the story. It has to be heartening, but it's just the nature of the injuries. You just don't know how long it will take to make the next improvement, and how long it'll take after that to make the next little step forward, and nobody knows how big or small those steps are going to take, and what part of Sean Cox the family will get back.
Yeah, because the cost of maintaining proper care around the clock, they've raised 27 grand of a 2 million goal, so there's a significant distance to go. This was actually brought up at the weekend on the pay-per-view. Jimmy McCarthy and Paul Rouse were in talking about John Green's piece in the Sunday Independent, and they did get around to discussing the fundraising efforts around this. Just a few interesting ideas in this, so it's worth us playing this again. Have a look.
The harsh realities of the world step in, the emotion that was there at the time is now dwindling in that sense, and now you have a family whose loved one is in real trouble, and now financially there's huge pressure coming over the line.
There's a thing there though on that, isn't there? Isn't that the banner, that Sean Cox banner carried by players onto the pitch? You'll never walk alone. Now, what does that really mean when it comes down to it? Surely there must be a way for people who are not just Liverpool fans, but genuinely want to help here to contribute to this. I mean, when you read this interview, and Martina, his wife, she just comes across as an exceptionally impressive woman who's there for her husband, really fighting for him. And it says Martina has become his voice in the thing, because she's trying to push things along for him, and that woman deserves every support, as the entire family do.
Yeah, so you get 12 weeks in Dunleary. That's what the state will provide when he comes back, and then you are on your own. They're hoping to raise, I think, a minimum of 2 million. There's talk of going to Germany. That seems to be the best place for rehabilitation. 2 million to a club like Liverpool? To Roma?
I would have a view that both clubs should give $1 million each, and it is. And then if there's other personal donations on top of that, but it's very easy with respect to players to walk around the field with a banner. You'll never walk alone.
Exactly.
That's
my point.
It's like players in a different context kissing the crest of a jersey, and then the next year they're playing for a different team and they kiss another crest. So sometimes shows of emotion like that, while they're important at that point in time for the Cox family, the test always comes in the end. I mean, I've always said in sport and in business, your courage is tested. Your courage is really tested, and Liverpool's courage now is tested in that this family need financial support, and I would expect Liverpool and Roma to be the people who give them that support, to send him to Germany and give him the best. His wife's line: give him the optimum opportunity for the remainder of his life in that sense.
Yeah, it's a very fair point that the lads are putting forward there in their conversation on the Sunday newspapers. These clubs are rich, they're pumping out money. They could easily afford $1 million each.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of like, seems like a no-brainer at the moment, and like I'm sure there will be something after, I guess, the next couple of weeks. You've got kind of obviously a court case pending. You've obviously got Sean going through his period of stay in Dún Laoghaire at the moment, and potentially, as Joe says there, then the plan is maybe to go over to Germany for the very best treatment, because to give him the best level, to give him the best chance of those big leaps that I mentioned, it's going to have to be the best treatment now. As far as I understand, and as far as we were hearing there in the previous interview, the Dún Laoghaire setup is exceptional. It's just extremely costly after that, and you're on your own after the 12-week period.